Welcome, welcome. I'm Mary Claire, and welcome back to Peak, the official Growth Sport podcast. Today, we're going to continue our series on Dr. Brian Ritchie's new book, The Culture Code, and talk through chapter 1, Culture, the Invisible Force Behind Every Win or Loss. Welcome back, Brian.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We're back in the saddle.
Back in the saddle.
Just as a reminder for those that maybe weren't in previous episodes, we're going chapter by chapter in the book, and the whole point of this podcast is to create yet another resource for leaders out there who are looking to create organizations and cultures that are aligned, engaged, and accountable. We're trying to give them every resource possible to be able to do that. We have training on the website. We've got now this book. We've got this podcast, videos. We've got all sorts of YouTube videos. Again, trying to equip leaders as best as possible. So in doing so, we're going step by step in this chapter. So if you'd like to go back a couple episodes and start from the beginning to get Brian's perspective on why he wrote the book and the premise of the book, please do so and join us back here as we jump into chapter 1. But Brian, let's get going.
Sounds good.
All right. Okay. So chapter 1, as I mentioned, culture, the invisible force behind every win or loss. I'd like to start this conversation off by talking about the results of companies with peak performance culture. So help us understand, tell us what companies look like when they're operating at peak performance and what they look like when they don't.
So this is really interesting. There was a study done. This was published in Forbes a few years ago. But it was really interesting. They took over a 20-year period of time. They took 20 companies that had a high growth performing culture and 12 that did not. And they just looked at what happened over 20 years. And they defined this by engagement, accountability, and alignment, which are the things that we find are the most important outcomes with respect to success. And the numbers are really quite stunning. So if you take revenue growth, the performance enhancing culture companies grew 682% compared to 166% for the other companies. Now, this is over that 20-year period of time.
Yep.
Employment growth, 282% to 36%. Stock price growth, 901% to 74%. Net income growth, 756% to 1%. So something's going on, in this situation. Something is driving results. This is why we like to say that if you get your culture right, the results will follow. You can get results right for a short period of time, but if your culture isn't right, they won't be sustainable. So how do you get long-term sustainable results? You got to get that culture correct.
Which gets back to our previous episode. We talked about what is culture, and you're naming it. Sometimes culture feels, for me as having been a leader and now as a coach, it can feel squishy. But if you nail it down, even alignment, engagement, and accountability can still feel like buzzwords, right? And we talked about what those really mean and how tangible and actionable they really are. So, when we talk about, let's talk about why companies get results and why they don't. So if we know that peak performance culture drives results and the data shows it, let's talk about why those companies get results. What are you seeing amongst the people, or what have we learned?
Yeah, ultimately, and we say this over and over again, the real key here is connecting your daily execution to your strategic intent. And again, these seem so obvious, like, of course, but there's some really unexplored and counterintuitive things going on in a lot of organizations. Let's do a thought experiment that might help. Let's say I'm in a boat and I'm rowing, and I have a bell curve of people in the boat and their contributions to our rowing and where we're headed. So let's say that I've got 20% of the boat that is like rowing as hard as they can in the right direction. And I've got another 20% on the other end of the boat rowing in the opposite direction as hard as they can. And then I've got 60% in the middle who are basically saying, I'm not sure which direction to row. Should I row backwards? Should I row forwards? I'm not sure what to do. And you can think about this parable with respect to a company. So suppose you've got a leader who comes in and says, hey, we're going to try something new. This is change leadership, change management. We're going to do something we haven't done before. And they explain what it is they're going to do. And in that organization, you have some people that say, awesome, let's go do it. I'm behind you 100%. Let's say that's roughly 20. That's the 20% rowing. That's right. Yeah. Yep. And then you've got 20% that are like, I hate this. I'm not doing it. And whether it's passive aggressive or outwardly aggressive, they become resistors, or they are resistors. And then you've got this 60% in the middle who don't really know which direction to go. And so what they do is they say, I'm going to wait and see which side wins, and I'm going to pile on that side because I don't want to look dumb and I don't want to waste my energy and I want to be on the winning team. So, I want to wait and see what happens. Now, think about this for a minute. If you've got 20% of the people who are pulling in the right direction and 80% of the organization either not doing anything or going in the other direction, which side's going to win?
Yep.
Yeah. The side that didn't change, right?
Well, and you see this a lot with that, to me, where what comes into play, and I was fault at this as a leader, without a doubt, where we say we're going to do something, we get all this energy behind it, and then we bail too soon. And then we do that again and again and again. And that 60% is either going to grow or more is going to grow to the 20%, right? So that 60% in particular is really hesitant because they've seen the story play out before. And why put my energy into something that's going to die because there's not the effective leadership up front or whatever it may be to bring it through to fruition. So I think we see that a lot.
You bring up a great point, which is over time, this culture becomes part of your culture, right? We're an organization that doesn't really do what we say we're going to do. So smart people, the money is on this failing. And so they don't get engaged. And so what happens? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It fails. And then the more it fails, the more people think it's going to fail, the less engaged they get. This leads to a vicious cycle, right, of disengagement. That's a culture of disengagement. So now let's think about it the other way. Let's say the leader comes in and says, hey, we're going to do this, 20% jump on board. And the 20% who aren't going to do it are never going to do it. But the leader works with the 60% and says, hey, give me 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it is, and let's see if we can't make this work. Look, if it doesn't work, I'll be the first to admit it. We'll pull back. But let's give it a chance. Let's execute against this and really see what happens. Yeah. Well, now you've got 80% of the organization working on making it happen. What's likely to take place? Well, it's either going to work, or if it doesn't work, you're going to know why it doesn't work.
Exactly.
And you're going to be able to make the right changes, right? But people don't feel like that they were duped or that they went along and it didn't work out or they looked foolish or they wasted their energy. So now you're creating a virtuous cycle of engagement, right? Which is, hey, it pays to be engaged. By the way, who is it going to be obvious for that they are not working to help the company forward? The 20%.
Yep.
And in that case, isn't that great? Because now the leader can say, hey, these people are either need an attitude adjustment and change, or they need to exit the organization.
Yeah.
So in this situation, you've done all the right things. You've created a culture of engagement in this situation, which grows on itself. Because now the next thing you do, you come along, you're like, hey, we're going to try this next thing. Your people are conditioned to get on board. They're like, okay, great, let's give it a shot. We trust the leader that if it doesn't work for some reason, they'll let us know and we'll try something else.
And we touched on this in the introduction, and of course, much of the book will focus on this. But how do you get that 60% to give you 5 to 6 to 10 weeks? And that change, change doesn't happen without process, and that's part of this program or part of this methodology. Is we also give you the process by which to get them on board, to get them engaged in what it is we're going to do, to align them and help them understand what's my job in getting it done, and then hold everybody accountable, including yourself as a leader.
Correct. That's exactly right. So well stated. We'll get to that. But this is so important to recognize that these little decisions lead to expectations, which lead to activity, which lead to results, right? And all of these things are kind of path dependent. You have to be cognizant of what's going on, because in almost an unaware kind of way, a leader can create an environment that creates a toxic culture. And that culture builds on itself and creates outcomes you don't want.
Yep. Well said. Okay. So let's talk about what good culture is. So let's say we kind of hinted on it, like we're getting that 60% to pull forward, at least for a period of time. But tell me, what are those traits? So we know that it drives results, but what are those kind of next level down, those key drivers, or those things that if these things are happening, I'm going to get results? What am I seeing?
Yeah. So I love that that we really can get to brass tacks about what are the characteristics of
Yep.
a high performance culture, a peak performance culture. The first thing is transparency. And we all talk about improved communication and transparency, but this is actually much harder to do than it sounds like. It's not just about, being kind of visible and talking about everything that happens. It's about being clear and organized and coordinated around what it is the organization is trying to accomplish. So transparency here is that everybody needs to understand what's happening, what their role is, and how what they do impacts the bigger
Yep.
objectives that the organization is going after. It has to be structured and it has to be creative, but everybody has to know. So that transparency is the first part of this.
Yep.
And by the way, each component of sport that we'll talk about in later editions of this podcast will coincide with these things and teach you exactly how to do these things. But that's the first thing, is you've got to get transparency. There can't be, if you don't have transparency, you get political environments that are very toxic and back channeling and all these difficult organizational traits.
Yep.
So that's the first one. The second one is that if you've got a transparent organization, you have to have a focus on continuous improvement. Where you are today can never be the end result. There's always got to be something more that we're working toward. It has to be this virtuous cycle of improvement. This is individual, this is team, this is corporate wide, right? We have to create an environment where everyone expects to always get better. The third one is that there has to be some process-driven safety. You've got to be able to rely on process and not charisma to move the organization forward. So if you have a culture of great leadership, it's actually not based on the charisma or the personality of the leader. It's really based on the expectation that I know exactly how this organization functions from a process standpoint. Does that resonate with you in terms of how you've seen things in your organizations?
Yeah, without a doubt. And even personally, in terms of me leading or watching leaders, I can, for a short period of time, get on board with a charismatic leader. But if there's no plan and it's not clear where we're headed, I don't care how much I like the person or how energetic they are, how charismatic they are. That process of help me understand what we're going to do and how we're going to get there, and the process by which to make that happen is imperative.
Yeah.
That's where it becomes long-term success rather than a short-term burst of results.
Yeah, I love that comment. And is that, if you think about this, we talk about this a lot. We want organizations that are meritocratic. We don't want to move forward based on our connections, our resources,
Yep.
It shouldn't be on who we know, it should be on what we know.
What we know.
Yep.
Well said.
The fourth is, and we talk a lot about this, is accountability. We need organizations that have clear accountability. And you can take a look at your organization today and tell whether it's a high accountability org or not just by who stays. If your best people are staying, you're running a high accountability org. If your low performers stay and your high performers leave, you need to look in the mirror quickly. You're probably running a low accountability organization.
That makes sense.
And the last one really is about trust. There has to be this environment of me being able to trust that others have my best interest at heart. I can never be vulnerable. I can never admit that I need help. I can never look to improve if I don't feel like everybody in the organization has my best interests and that I can trust what they're thinking and doing. So those are the 5 big areas.
And all of those lead into trust, right? Everything before that builds trust, right?
Correct.
And then trust feeds. It's interrelated.
It's a virtuous cycle. Exactly. And most cultures they all feed back on each other.
So, okay, Brian, that was super helpful. I highly recommend folks reading the first chapter as they move along with us. But let's say they're going along this journey with us and they're either at this chapter or farther along and they're like, woof, I am definitely not operating, our organization's not operating at peak performance. So what does somebody do? What's the first step?
I think there's a couple things that we'd recommend. One is go out to our free DIY videos on YouTube and just watch those. We'll give you more background and detail on how to implement these. The book is obviously a resource. If you haven't read the book, we highly recommend that. We also on the website have resources, and then there's an application you can also download and use for free, which will allow you to track your goals and your all of your day-to-day activities and execution. So these are all tools that can help you get aligned and get engaged and accountable for your team.
All right, Brian. Well, thanks for the background on chapter 1. I'm excited to continue this conversation. Folks have questions or ideas for us, please feel free to contact us, www.growth-sport.com. Brian, thanks for your time. And for all those listeners out there, feel free to like us and share on Spotify or wherever you may get your podcast. Thank you.